Are you a filmmaker or content creator with a vision that demands the best? Then look no further than IPGRentals.com, the ultimate destination for audio, video, lighting, drones, and support gear for your productions. At IPG Rentals, we believe in the power of collaboration. Our gear becomes an extension of your creativity, bringing your vision to life. And with our tagline, Our Gear, Your Vision, we're not just a rental service, we're your production partner. Why choose IPG Rentals, you may ask? Easy. We bring quality, reliability, and an extensive range of top-notch equipment. From industry-standard cameras and audio equipment to state-of-the-art lighting and drones, our gear is meticulously maintained to ensure you get the best results every time. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.ipgrentals.com. Our Gear, Your Vision. Welcome to Media Hub. Oh! Hello and thank you for joining us on Media Hub. I'm your host, Dondi Sanchez, and today's episode is named The Next Big Thing. Our guest has worked on many different projects as a DP and camera operator, and her name is Abigail Rath. Abby is quickly making her name for herself in the industry, and today she's here and she's going to share her insights on what it takes to propel your career to the next level. So without further ado, let's meet Abby. Abby, how you doing?
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm so glad you're able to make it. I know you're actually away on a shoot, and you're actually working today, so we're going to make this pretty quick. But I know you have a lot of insights for our viewers, so I really appreciate that you were able to be on the show.
I appreciate you having me so much.
Yeah, so Abby, why don't you, because me and you, we worked together only once, me and you together, but you've worked with our team here at IPG on several jobs, right? And they always came back saying how cool you were to work with and everything like that. And so when I got to work with you, I was like, she's a very cool person, you know? And you actually helped me out on a job because I knew that the project that came into our company, I was like, I know I'm not going to be able to deal with this person. So I was like, who can I get to do this job? Who can I get to do this job? And boom, I called you and you're like, sure, let's do it. And you did an amazing job. So I know you have a great personality. You know how to work with clients. You work with the team very well. You know how to lead. But tell the people a little bit about yourself, how you got into the industry.
How I got into this industry, it's that's like just the life story in general, because I was always that kid who grew up loving cameras, got really into photography when I was young, and started working as soon as I went to a weird high school. So they gave me a lot of opportunity to learn there and to just also go out and do stuff like PA or whatever came up, and they were flexible with my school schedule because I argued that was more important, and it has definitely paid off. So that's kind of how I got my start, but it wasn't really traditional through film school or anything. I started as a PA.
So you're saying that after high school, you didn't even go to film school. You just started working right in the industry. You got right into it.
Yeah, I went to a community college for a couple business courses, and then I remember a very important phone call with one of my parents, and I was like, I hate business, and everyone I know works in the film and TV industry here. And this was also in Wisconsin, where there's not that big of a market. So right. I just felt like it was one of those things where life points you in a certain direction, and you just have to keep following that. And my professors even were like, hey, school's always going to be here if you want to come back next semester. That was the semester I told them I was going to work at the Atlanta Film Festival for a couple years into that. And I just never have gone back so far. That was like 7 years ago.
Wow. So let me ask you this. How did you get your first real job out of high school then? Explain that.
What do you mean real job? Like a job on set?
So, yeah, your first job. Yeah. What was your first job on set?
So my first job on set was the PA job. It was for 2 weeks. Like the last 2 weeks of my senior year in high school, I was 17, and in different ways, I was only PA on that indie film, and in different ways, the director, the AD connected me with a great production manager in the area who I ended up working on as a PA on commercials and halftime shows. Because I'm from Green Bay, so there's a lot of ESPN, there's a lot of Packers, there's a lot of Cellcom commercials. So like that was like my life for like 4 years. And then at the same time, I was working at, that was my first adult job, was at a nonprofit Christian radio station, working and doing all their social media, photos, videos, and then I ended up leading more into the production stuff and went into film festivals and stuff. And I don't know, alongside I was always shooting weddings too. So I was just trying to do as many different jobs, and I was living on my own. So I was trying to like make an income. So whoever would pay me to pick up a camera and shoot something, like I would do it. You know what I mean?
You're a hustler.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this though: can you navigate? Like, how did you get your foot in the door? Because let's say there's a lot of people like you.
Yeah.
Not everybody's college material film or just
Sure.
university material, and that's okay. That's fine. You know what I mean? There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. But so you might have people out there and they'll be like, I want to get in the industry, but I really don't want to go to school. But I'm a fast learner. I'll ask questions. I know how to deal with people. I'm a quick learner. How did you navigate your way, right, to get those jobs without going to school? What did you do?
The first thing is that it's a mindset. You have to have the mindset of being a self-starter and as well as a lifelong learner. I've never been on a set, even today, what I'm working on, like I learned something every time. If you're ever not learning, then like something's wrong with you, not everyone around you. Because what is like I get that a lot of the film school stuff, because I have friends who did go to film school, who are super pro film school.
Yeah.
And the biggest advantage that I think that they have is their alumni networks. And so I knew that going in. Like I interviewed people who went to film school before when I was considering going to school or not, like going and talking to other people, whether they be in your peer group or they're 5 years ahead of you or 10 years. Like, yes, you can talk to mentors who are maybe like 20 years along in their career, but I think it's a little easier when you find someone who's maybe 5 or 10 years ahead of where you want to be, because then they can kind of like, they're a little closer. So like, it's a little easier to get their point of view on things. But at the same time, like, what is film school? It's education. So you still have to like educate yourself. Just because I said I wasn't going to finish school, like I never stopped educating myself. If I wasn't on set, like I've listened to a million like cinematography podcasts or interviews, or there's so many resources online, asking people out for coffee, whether they are in your department or not, because you can learn from every department, or maybe realize that, hey, I want to be in a different department. As a PA, that's the beauty of it. You start as a general PA, and then you're kind of helping out each department. So you can see, do I like art department? Do I like being in the grip truck? Do I like, putting cameras together like Legos every day? I love that stuff. So, you kind of find your people a little bit more that way naturally, I think, but you're still finding like mentors, and you should always be looking for someone who's one step ahead of you, and trust that good people will give you their time. Like if you ask like, hey, can I do a phone call with you? Can I do a coffee? Can I take you to lunch? And be prepared, have 10 questions or whatever you want to ask them. But getting those meetings isn't as hard as I feel like people make it out to be. I'm very extroverted, so I have a lot of empathy for my introverted friends, but still, I just look at it as it's my job. Like, it's my job to pick up the phone and call someone and ask them about their life. Like, just do it.
No, I think you said it. I think you hit the nail on the head, because you said, yes, I'm an extrovert, right? I feel sorry for my introvert friends. But as you said, it's up to me to go out there and make the calls, right?
Yeah.
That's what you had to do, right? Especially to get out there, put your name out there without knowing people from school, right? Yeah. You just, so you had a staff job already for 4 years, right? You work with a production company, and you recently went freelance. When did you go freelance? Like 4 months ago?
Yeah,
5 months ago?
It was March of this last year, so like just over 6 months ago.
Okay.
And yeah, like the first 4 years was kind of freelance when I was doing all that random stuff, and then like 4 years ago, so I've been in the industry for, I say, 7 or 8 years. That's kind of how I've divided it up, and getting into freelancing again has been very refreshing and inspiring in its own way.
Yeah, I want to, because now that you see both sides, right? I want you to give your advice on pros of working for a production company, right? And then what made you churn to say, hey, I'm ready, I want to go freelance instead. But can you just talk a little bit about your experience on first, because you were freelance first, and then you decided to go work with a staff production company, as an employee, right? What made you
Mm-hmm.
do that after being freelance for a while?
It's really hard to talk about that decision without bringing up, like, without sounding cliche, sexism in the workplace. So I was trying to get into the camera department for quite a while, but no, like and I didn't know people in the industry. So the production manager that I was working with, it was kind of like a brick wall, like, because I kept getting PA jobs or little things, but and I was shooting weddings, like I said, photo and video, like almost full time. So I had all that shooting experience. I love traveling from a young age, so I've always done like solo backpacking trips to like Europe and South America a bunch, and in those trips I would always take my camera and shoot stuff. So basically how that came about was, like, I got to a point where I had a conversation with a friend who I was like, I need to get from this DSLR YouTuber like world shooting weddings to like the cinema, like to whatever they're shooting the next Netflix series on. Like, how do I do that? Because that's another, okay, besides the connections, that's another reason a lot of people go to film school, because they usually have a media center that has access to bigger cameras, whether they have a set of FS7s or C300s or even Reds or Aries, so every school is different, but usually kids can, rent that stuff out. And I didn't have that. So, this production company, they worked on an apprenticeship basis, and I was looking for a mentor. And that's the biggest piece of advice I was always given. And it's still something, I still have mentors in my life. Finding someone, like I said earlier, who's a little bit ahead of you, and then someone who's like way ahead of you. And using those mentorships can be really powerful and build really wonderful relationships as well. So it's something I'm very, very thankful for. But that was the biggest turning point, because my friend was like, oh, I have this guy who went to college with, and he works for this production company. Maybe you should look at it. And so, again, kind of putting what you want to do out there, and then letting the people in your life, you never know who knows who or who has a connection where. So yeah, I just remember it happened very organically. But the biggest reason was that I wanted to go from that to like more of the TV world, commercial world.
Well, let me ask you this: what would you tell the newcomers that are getting into an industry, right? What would you tell them? What are some of the steps that they should take to break into the industry?
It depends on what you want to do. But if you want to do camera stuff, like, just go shoot your own stuff. It doesn't. You can shoot on your iPhone. Contact local production companies, wherever you're living. Like, there's going to be some sort of industry. I'm from Wisconsin. There was very little, but you could still, basically how it worked for me was there was like one production manager who pretty much ran all of the commercials and TV shoots that were in Wisconsin. So I got in touch with him and got on his list as a PA, and then he kind of recommends you out. So I cannot not emphasize those relationships enough. But also, like, when we talk about, I don't know what your thoughts are, but like when we talk about, oh, this is an industry of relationships, like, people think that means taking someone out to coffee and saying, hey, can you hire me? Like, oftentimes I think so much what's more important is like the relationships that we're building and how those happen organically, like, because you care about the people you're on set with. Like, my crews, I very much care about how they're doing. I care about their kids or about how their life's going outside of work, and having those conversations. And then you get to the end, oh yeah, by the way, I've got this project coming up. Like, I had you in mind. I think that usually benefits. I don't know, it's a much better working relationship than this transactional thing. But with social media and stuff, it has begun to feel a little transactional in the relationships. But I also like to say that because I don't think relationships should be so transactional.
And because I watch your post a lot. Like, you post a lot. You definitely do, especially with your traveling and things like that. But it definitely. People get to know you. People get to see how you really are, But being on set with you as well, like, there's no different, You're the same out of work than you are at work. And I agree with you. The way you're going about it, as far as building relationships on set, you're going about it the right way. It's not necessarily about, oh, let me take you out to lunch to see if I can get some work out of you. No, it's not like that. You know what I mean? Keep doing what you're doing, and you'll be fine. I promise. But here's my next question. And I think you said before about your apprenticeship. So would you agree that internships, apprenticeships, and volunteering are great opportunities for newcomers in the industry? Yeah. So they should definitely look for them.
100%. Like, you should. I'm fully a fan of like make a vision board, make a list of what are the I'm speaking camera, but like what DPs do you like, what directors do you like, who are people that if they could mentor you, even if it's someone really big, kind of track that down. So I knew a gal who like really loved working with this one actor, so she would like follow this actor on that's kind of stalkerish, I don't want to say that, but she did her research and would always find the line producer that was working on those movies and would contact that line producer and say, here's my PA, I'm a PA, here's my resume. It's that kind of hustle that like this isn't the kind of industry that you're just going to see a posting on LinkedIn and be able to apply for it. You very much need to be proactive because when I'm not working as a freelancer, I'm looking through Facebook groups. That's a huge underrated thing is Facebook groups. That's only thing I use Facebook for nowadays for work, or Staff Me Up or Production Hub. Depending what area of the country you're in, it's a little different. Sure, do you get a lot of word of mouth stuff after a while? But I think breaking in, finding a mentor who is willing to take you and hey, can I shadow you? Can I come to set and be your AC? I'll work for free. I'm not against working for free when you're just starting out. PAs work next to nearly nothing, and they work so hard. So when someone says,
I'm glad you said about the working for free, because when I got in the industry, that's all you have to do to really get your name out there.
Yeah.
And get to know people and get on sets was my first year out of school, I worked for free 90% of the times. I said on another show, I made $6,000 the first year out of school. $6,000. You know what I mean? That's nothing.
Yeah.
But I had acquired so much experience because I got to work on so many TV shows back then. And Florida was kind of like what Atlanta is now. So I mean, there was so much work. So I got to meet a lot of people, and so. But today, everything is like, oh, how much am I getting paid? Or how much am I doing this? I understand, but if this is something you love and this is what you want to do, you got to sacrifice in the beginning, in order to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah, because I still work for free. I shoot stuff for my friends all the time. When you do favors for people, hey, I have this little indie thing I want to shoot for a weekend. Can you help me? Yes, because I very much believe that what goes around comes around as well. And how you treat people, kind of what you were saying earlier about who you are online and showing up and being that same person authentically. It's become more and more important to me that I also just value the people I'm working with, and I know that they're good people. And I think that that's really important in this industry as well, because it's, again, going back to, hey, everything's about relationships. So if you're going to work 12 hours a day with someone, I would much rather work 12 hours a day with someone who I know I get along with well. There's something I heard a while ago that makes a lot of sense. It's if you have two of these three things, 99% of the time you'll get hired. And it's not specific to our industry, but the three things were, one, being a really good person, just being someone who's very personable, people like hanging around with, you're nice. The second one is being on time, and then being timely with your deadlines, your work, whatever. And the third one is being really, really good at your job, just being very talented, very skilled, very, very smart. And so maybe you're really, really good at your job and you always get shit done on time, but maybe you're not the nicest person to work with, or maybe you're a little quirky. You'll still probably get hired, but maybe you're really, really nice and you're always on time, but your skills aren't really there yet. You'll probably still get hired, because I would much rather work with someone who is busting their butt over there, lifting coolers and, getting lunch picked up, so that we can focus more on what we're doing, especially since a lot of what you and I do, at least now, there are bigger shoots, of course, but a lot of it is smaller, probably, crew of 10 or smaller. And that's what the majority of, I also think that that's what the majority of our lifestyle is like, whereas a lot of people look at our industry and say, oh, you always get to work on these big fancy sets with LED walls and stuff. And yes, are those shoots very cool? But yeah, of course, and I'm thankful. But most of the times, we're getting up at 3 a.m. and going to do a Good Morning America thing or something. You know what I mean? It's not as glamorous as it also seems to be, or it's midnight and you're still in the office taking cameras apart because you got to get back to the rental house by 8 a.m. or whatever the rules are. It's not always as glamorous as what people think it is.
That's the stuff you really want to post, though. That's the stuff you really want to post. You want to post at 2 a.m. call time, or striking at midnight in the rain and be like, yeah, you still want to be in the industry? This is what it's really like.
like I had one of my mentors who I'll never forget. He was like, if you don't love, unloading the truck and loading up the truck at the beginning and end of every day, or whether it's that or it's your grip truck or, your office, whatever, if you don't love that part of the early morning and the late nights, like it's going to be really hard for you to make it in the long run. And
Right.
you can tell a difference when you're on set working with people who have kind of come up through that and have had to put in those hours versus someone who, because there is a level of nepotism. So sometimes maybe you have a client who doesn't totally understand the crew's needs or what it's like to work that hard. But at the end of the day, like if like as much as like the job might be crappy sometimes, it's kind of like the camaraderie of we're all in it together. Like, and that's what gets me through a lot too. Again, it goes back to why having good relationships with your crew is so important. Because if you're stuck with someone for 12 hours and there's nothing else going on, like, I don't know, I would much rather be with someone who has good memes at least or something, has a good attitude.
No, look, absolutely. And honestly, like you're not the only person out of all the interviews that we've done that have said that. It's because you spend a majority of the time with these crew members. So you want to be with somebody that you enjoy being with, so don't be a jerk, don't be grumpy. Don't be, always have a good attitude, always, like you said, take care of your crew. So let me ask you this. How did you get your first DP job?
I don't know what level you would consider that, but like my first DP job, the one that was actually, let me talk about the one that we did, the Disney one, because that was a big one for me. So first of all, I PA'd for that company when I was like 17, and then The World is Very Small, and it was the same production company. And I didn't realize that till the day of we got the shoot, and I saw on the call sheet like the logo from one of the production companies. I was like, oh, I remember seeing this, and I remember like 5-6 years ago. So that was a very circle moment, but also because that producer had reached out to me personally and asked about my availability for that, and it was a bigger shoot for Disney for some of their Disney Channel like promo stuff that we were doing, and it wasn't a huge big shoot, but it was bigger than a lot that I'd done before, and we had amazing cameras, and you helped me a lot with that, and I was so glad that your team was there. But that meant a lot to me because the producer, even in the planning and the gear, and I was going over what we would need, and I remember I was calling you like, am I thinking through all of this correctly? Are we missing anything? Right. And so him putting all of that trust in me and producers putting their trust in me, like that meant the most to me. And so that was a really good moment too. That was one of my first bigger DP projects.
How long did it take for you to transition from, because you said you PA'd and things like that, to the DP role?
Oh, yeah. So, no, that's one other thing I wanted to say about film school or education or whatever. I learned a lot of different positions. Like, as a PA, you'll spend a lot of time in a couple different departments probably. Maybe you'll find one you really like if you really like art department or really like lighting or whatever. But one of the biggest things that I've learned from some of my mentors is how to work different positions. For one of my mentors, I was his audio op for like the first 6 months before I even touched a camera. And so now I know, which this has happened before, where I show up on set and something happens and my audio guy doesn't show up. Okay, I can run a mixer on the field if I need to. And the biggest thing that this has come in to help in the last couple months is being a PA, and you kind of grow up, so you know the AC stuff, you know the camera operating stuff, you know the DP, like you know how to grip, you know how to gaff. There's also, if you're interested, there's an insane course in Atlanta run by this gal who's a producer called the PA Academy. I forgot I did that too, but it's a 2-day intensive, like 10-hour days, and it's like she goes through, this is how everything would be on set, this is how you need. So for someone who hasn't gone to film school, there are options like that that will get you the cool on-set etiquette education. Yeah, because on-set etiquette also is something you kind of have to learn, the hierarchy and that kind of thing. But all of that being said, since kind of figuring out this freelance thing, it's allowed me to take a variety of positions. I'll work as DIT media manager, or I've worked as a camera op, or I've worked as an AC, because maybe it's a production company I haven't worked with before. So maybe they're not sometimes you kind of have to prove yourself a little bit to them. And then the next time they call you, they're like, oh yeah, Abby also is a cam op. Oh, let's get her on a cam op the next shoot. So sometimes it's just getting your foot in the door. And so if you are humble and you're like, okay, I'll take like an AC position instead of a cam op position, maybe there's something for me to learn here. for me personally, I've really wanted to get back into narrative. I did a lot of narrative when I was freelancing way before as a PA on some indie stuff. And recently I was able to get on a couple other indie things that happened over the summer in Florida when the industry's been a little slower. And, you know, I took AC jobs because narrative isn't something I was super familiar with. Most of my stuff is unscripted, commercial, corporate. That's also kind of what you learn is the different genres, I guess, of our work. But I learned so much from that set as an AC, but then also it gave me the confidence to kind of see how they were shooting it and be like, oh, why didn't I think I could do a narrative? Like, this is like the same thing I do normally. It's just kind of organized a little differently because you're doing scenes instead of just coverage of an event or a conference or a corporate thing. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like,
no,
so,
it does make sense because as you said that,
yeah,
I was the same way about commercials because I started out as sitcoms, game shows, and then the same thing, you know, corporate, ENG, EFP, a lot of promos and things like that. But when I did national commercial spot, I was a little in my head, and I was already like well into my career. And when I did it, I was like, this is it. Like I could do this no problem.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It's just a different format.
Yeah, it is. It is because it all works the same. You know, Wayne? It all works the same. Okay, so what would you say, right, for newcomers that are coming in, right? What is one key thing that you should tell them about this industry? What should they expect?
I feel like it's just that. I feel like it's being flexible. Don't lock yourself. I would advise don't lock yourself into one position. Have one position in mind as your goal. Like if you want to be a director or whatever, like you could work towards that. But don't let your ego get in the way when you're 22 thinking that you know what I mean? Like that's probably the biggest thing. And that also relates to gear because there's a lot of great gear. There's a lot of amazing cameras out there, and knowing a little bit about each one and why they have their benefits and what's the use for them, instead of just being like, oh, I would never shoot Blackmagic. That's so like YouTuber. I've shot on a Blackmagic before. They're great in certain scenarios. They're not great in other scenarios. So it's more of like, what is the right tool for this job more so than it is like what's going to make me look the coolest or, you know, what's the newest camera. You know, maybe you don't need a 6K sensor for like a local commercial. Who knows?
So let me ask you this because, you know, talking about all especially all the cameras, but as far as the industry, you in the 7 years that you've been in it, right? And I'm sure it's evolved just in that short amount of time, right? What trends do you see emerging now in our industry?
Besides vertical shooting?
Yes, which I can't stand. I literally can't stand it. Yes. Well, believe it or not, so here's the deal. When I got in industry, I started in TV as well, in sitcoms, so it was 4:3. Then we had to learn 16:9, right? And even when web first came out, web videos, it was like, oh, that's just a web video. Don't worry, you know, it's nothing. And look where we are now, right? And now it's like, oh, he's just shooting on a phone. And now I literally get calls for like, yeah, a camera package. Oh, yeah, do you have the latest iPhone? So, because we have to shoot some, you know, some social spots as well. And we got to shoot some vertical, things like that. And, you know, especially now with the new iPhones, I mean, it's ridiculous what you can do with these things. But I literally can't stand shooting vertical. I can't.
Really?
Because you lose the whole frame. But I'm old.
You do lose the frame. You do lose the frame. But I think it gives you, I don't know. For me, it's fun. Like I've had clients ask for that stuff too. And it's fun because it's like, I haven't shot something like this vertical. How are we going to compose it differently? Because now you've got different blank space to compose it with. So I think it's a fun challenge. I understand. But at the same time, like change has been the only constant so far in my experience. So it's the future. And I'm like, okay, let's get on board. How can we make this cool? And also, I think like I try to watch a lot of music videos and other commercials and like hype because they are using that vertical shooting in a very, very interesting way. There's a lot of like creatives out there who are very innovative in how they use the whole, you know, vertical style, and they make it into a very stylistic choice as well. But yeah, no. And I also think that content creators weren't really taken as seriously. I think that they are being taken more seriously now. It depends on kind of what genre, again, you're talking about. But there are some I've met and worked with who are really serious and really professional. But then there's others who have never been on a set and they don't really know what they're doing. But I don't think that you can make a blank statement, because you could say that about DPs too. I've worked with amazing DPs, and I've worked with DPs who don't even know how to turn their camera on. So there's like always a spectrum. It's always a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
That's funny.
I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It does, because like I said, like you said, vertical. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It really isn't. And old people like me are the ones that really just got to shut up and just deal with it. And it is what it is. I mean, we had to learn how to set the frame up even when it went from 4:3 to 16:9. It was a whole different way of stacking people and setting up the shot and composition. Everything was totally different. So I just got to shut up and deal with it.
It's also very project specific, I feel like, because like I said, I've been doing more narrative, and that's my goal. I really want to be doing series. I want to be doing scripted. And the biggest humbling thing that I've had to deal with is now I'm not only worried, because usually if you have a client come to you, hey, we're shooting this interview at this office for this company, for this conference, this is kind of how it's going to be set up. And you just get there and you kind of have to make the best of it. You light it with what the room looks like, if you have a big window, or if you don't, and if you have to bring lights in, whatever it looks like. But in the series, like that kind of stuff, you have more creative control. So I just shot my first short film in LA, and that was an insane experience. But that was something I was like, oh, wait, how do I want to frame this? Because we're shooting full frame. But do I want to crop in? Do I want the 16:9? Do I want the 4:3? For that more traditional? And that was a creative choice I was thinking about more so than, oh, this is the camera the client wants and has paid for. These are the specs of that camera. So these are our options. And so I keep using in my personal life, I keep using that phrase of I very much feel like I'm a ballet dancer taking a hip hop class for the first time, where you're learning to be a little more oh, what if we do this? This could be fun. Traditionally, you don't want flares. They're bad. But when they're used correctly, flares can look so beautiful. And you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a gray area.
So did you, because I saw some of the stills you sent me and some of the stuff that I think you posted. I know you sent it to me, but did you DP that short? Nice. It was very nice.
Thank you. I shot it, directed it, DP'd it, produced it. It was a crazy week, but
nice.
I'm editing it right now too. So wish me luck.
So the credits are all going to be Abby Rath. No, that's great. That's awesome. No, I look forward to watching it, because the stills you sent me were great. Thanks. What was that?
I appreciate that. No, I had an amazing team. It wasn't all me. It was definitely not all me. My gaffer was insane. He was awesome, Con, and I met a lot of cool people. And that also, I went to LA from that, and I'm not based in LA. So my entire crew. This is again why I want to emphasize: if you want to start finding work, getting into the industry, Facebook groups. I know none of us use Facebook anymore. I certainly don't, unless it's for work, really, because those Facebook groups are where somebody will post, hey, we need someone here, and they'll list it, they'll list the position, they'll list that. Here's an email, send your resume. And if I'm not on set somewhere, morning routine is sitting there for 2 hours and kind of going through all of the Facebook groups, all the ads, and just sending my resume out. Because also maybe they don't have something for you this time, but they might be like, oh, this girl reached out and she's in Florida or whatever. So they'll think of you next time as well. So there's a lot to say about Facebook groups and kind of putting yourself out there as well. And I found my whole crew, I found them all through a Facebook crew call. And I got literally hundreds of messages, and I felt so bad. I was trying to reply to everyone individually. But the people I did end up picking were amazing, and I'm so thankful. They made the project 100 times better.
Why did you choose
And they also
LA?
got us the gear. So long story short, I was in Vegas for a different gig and then the morning I was supposed to leave, I saw a Facebook post of this girl hey, I think our DP is like scamming us, blah, blah, blah. And she seemed really young. And usually I would just scroll past that drama. But something in me was like, maybe I should reach out. So I reached out to her. I was like, hey, I'm a DP. I'll be done with work at this time. Call me anytime. That evening, I ended up being on the phone with her and her dad for like 3 hours. And she wants to get into the industry. They had this short film. They had the funding for it. Only thing was, this was on a Wednesday and they wanted to shoot the following Monday. And they had casting and the locations chosen. But I was like, okay, so in 24 hours, I got them a budget that had like the executive producer budget that has like the crew. I also added in a tab for like, because neither of them were in the industry. So I added a tab of like, what is an AC next to the line of AC, costs this much a day, but this is why we really need an AC. You know what I mean? So I could kind of justify that to them as well and help translate it. And they really appreciated it. And then, I was going over the script with them. I don't think I slept or ate for like those 4 days. And then we shot on Monday somehow at this beautiful church in LA. Yeah, I got a flight out there last minute. I stayed with a really wonderful assistant director friend of mine and was very thankful that she had a couch for me to crash on. And then we shot it in like 2 days. And yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Wow. Well, that's cool. I really look forward to it. Yeah. I look forward to seeing it. You're going to have to show it. You're going to have to send it to me, the link, wherever it's at. Through the 7 years that you've been in the industry, what would you say are some common challenges that freelancers face?
The one I was going to say earlier is I think it's really important to know a bunch of different positions, or even as a head of department, like you have to know what your audio guy needs so you can also empathize with him, right? Like, because I'm sure audio guys get sick of asking for people to wait for room tone. So if you as a DP know, oh, wait, I got to give him time for room tone. You know what I mean? So like looking out for your crew and knowing what they need comes with like knowing all those positions. But then also, so that's the leadership side of it. So the problem that I've run into is if I'm working for a new production company I haven't worked for before and I sign on as a media manager, they know me as a media manager. So that's a little bit because people are dealing with so many freelancers, so many, so they're like, they think Abby, media manager. And so that's something I've been a little more just careful about, because I really want to put myself out there as like, I am a DP and I know what I'm doing, as well as a camera operator. I will never say no to a bigger opportunity, like you mentioned earlier, national commercial, and maybe you take a lower position because it's, something much bigger than you. But that's kind of in the way you market yourself as well. So I post my DP work. I might not post like, hey, I'm media managing, because it's also part of how you want to be perceived. And so if you're really trying to get work as a DP, and especially as a woman, I think that is so important, because I cannot tell you, I think it happened with him. I remember someone showed up, a producer, and they started talking to one of my audio guys like, hey, like, so this is what we're doing today. And my audio guy was like, I don't know, I'm just going to boom it. So talk to her.
Wow. I got to say that Eli, I'm going to ask Eli, was that you? He says it could have been.
It could have been.
He said most likely.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Eli. But no, I think it's so funny, and I take it, pretty lightly. But as a woman especially, you kind of have to stand your ground on that and be like,
it's so weird that it's so weird to me that that's still happening, because when I first got in the industry, man, I probably knew maybe 2 or 3 women camera operators. That's it. And today it's women in the technical side of things. It is by far 100 times more women than it was back then. And so to me to see that, I can't believe. I mean, then again, I'm not a woman, but it's just so hard for me to see that, because I think I thought it was so different now, because there are so many women camera operators and DPs out there now.
I think there's something to be said about what's in front of the camera versus behind, because I have consistently seen a lot more diversity in general, not just, you talk about color. I've seen a lot more diversity in front of the camera than behind the camera. I personally don't really know any other female camera operators a lot in Florida. A lot of that I follow or that I look up to are in the LA area. There are other women I work with in Florida, of course. But then, I've also run into issues of like, I personally decided to take a headshot off of my resume, which I didn't know why I had on the first place after I realized I was hired based off of my appearance once, not off of my credentials. So like,
Wow.
there's definitely stuff like that that happens. Um,
Yeah.
and it's kind of just normal. But at the same time, I've very much realized how important it is that you use your voice, how important it is that you like talk about things. And at the same time, it is, I just heard a girl talking about the other day that she saw something happened. The other girl didn't want to say anything. So she said something and she became the problem of like, oh, she's trying to get this guy fired. You know, so that kind of stuff definitely still happens, and I don't really want to
Yeah.
bring down the conversation,
No,
but
no, of
I could
course,
tell
yeah,
stories
but
about that. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just sad that
Yeah.
that still happens, you know, and it's
Yeah.
to be hired for a look instead of what you know too. I'm gonna apologize for that because that's definitely wrong. You know what I mean? Especially,
It's
I
not
want
you,
to.
but
I know, I know that. I know that. I mean,
like I
I'm the
always,
I hired you on that other job because I knew your attitude and your personality would be a great fit for the project. See what I'm saying? As a business
yeah,
owner, I have
yeah,
to do that. I knew like I would just be frustrated with that specific client. Like I knew like
yeah,
I would just be like this all day. So for me, I have to put the right person in there to make sure the client is happy, and not only that, but the job gets
yeah,
done correctly. You know, and they ended up loving you.
yeah,
They ended up loving you. She had
yeah,
nothing but great things to say about you. So, and I told you that. I told you that. I
yeah,
love letting the crew know when people say good things about them. You know.
yeah. I appreciate that, and any feedback I get, positive or negative, I love because I also realized doing that little short film, like I was kind of looking to my team because it was something that I hadn't done a lot before. I'd never shot something like that on my own with so little planning, and
Yeah.
so I realized really early into the day that like they're not going to if a shot looks good or not because I'm the director and the DP. So they're going to do what I say. And
Yeah.
it also, I have to be confident in that. So it pushes me. And I can't talk about the growth and confidence as a freelancer without talking about your personal growth. Because as, you know, as I've gotten older, I realize my personal life really, really affects how I see myself and how I see myself as a freelancer or whatever. Like you are your own business. And so
Yeah.
if you don't even believe in yourself, how is somebody else going to believe in yourself? You know, because you're in
Absolutely.
yourself. So that's why it's so important that you have standards, you have you know, this is how things run. And I always give that caveat because so many of my mentors were older men who have been in the industry for 20 plus years, and they know so much, and I can't express my gratitude enough for that. And I do think the industry is changing. And I think it's because of people like you. I think it's because the industry only changes if we are like holding ourselves accountable. You know what
Right.
I mean? Because there are people who
Right.
will like say, I don't know, they will say, hey, we have to have a woman on this because of, you know, diversity, or the agency wants that for numbers, you know, like diversity hires all happen all the time. So it's kind of like the best way I've seen it is like, yeah, you might be a diversity hire, but then what you make of that is like on you. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you work
Right.
hard and you prove yourself, maybe you got a foot in the door because like they needed a woman on set or a person of color on set or something. But like the
Yeah.
reason they're going to call you back, this is why I say your attitude on set should always be so that you get called back next time. I remember when I was PAing on a Samsung commercial with a ton of like YouTubers way back, and there was another PA who, like, it was his first job or something. He just got out of film school. And basically, I had a 2-hour drive back that night. This was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I lived like 2 hours away, and it was like a snowstorm that night. So the driving was dangerous, and I was PA, so they didn't provide me any accommodations or travel or mileage or anything. But I said something like that. He was like, oh, how far is your drive tonight? As we were wrapping up that evening, cleaning everything up. And I was like, oh, it's like 2 hours. It's not that bad. You know, he's like, oh, but there's such a bad snowstorm. You should start driving now before it gets worse. Like, have you said something to the producer? And I was like, no, because I haven't been wrapped yet. And my thought was like, I knew that I didn't want the producer to look at me less like this girl's. And so basically what happened was he comes back over from the producer and assistant director who were sitting in a corner talking, and I see him come back over, and he was like, "Hey, I just told them like your situation, like you're good to go. They said you're good to be wrapped for the night, so you can get home earlier." And I was like, "Dude, like why would you do that? I didn't ask you."
Right.
Because even though his intentions were good, him going over and saying that probably made me look like I was complaining. You know what I mean? It probably made me look like I was like, "Oh, I have such a long drive tonight and I'm still here and it's 10 o'clock and we're not even wrapped yet. Everyone else was wrapped an hour ago." It's that kind of BS that you kind of put up with on set when you're first getting your foot in the door. But when I explained that to him, like he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you look bad." But I think I've just always been aware that like how you're perceived on set is pretty important. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Absolutely.
That's my one answer.
And would you agree with most of your jobs that you get are from your last job? Like your next job is most
I've gotten
of the
a
time
lot
from
of
your last
repeat
job.
clients. Yeah, I think it, or it's word of mouth. It's a producer who knows another producer, and they say, "Oh, I worked with this great camera op last month," you know. So it's a lot of word of mouth. Those tend to be the most reliable. But then also, yeah, it's unless you have a really strong reel or resume, which I'm thankful for that. But at the same time, it's hard to get your foot in the door if you don't know someone at a company. And again, maybe that goes back to like finding those local companies or those local producers or production managers, because those are the people who are high. Also knowing who's going to hire someone, because even as a DP, sometimes you don't have the say on who your camera crew is. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not like you can hire whoever you want all the time. Maybe they say, "Hey, we're bringing you in, and then we've got this team." So doing your research and knowing who hires people on the kind of set you want to be on, like, is also important as well.
What would you? How about this? Because you mentioned it earlier a little bit about marketing yourself. How important is branding yourself, and what are some of the things that you do for branding yourself?
Not enough. That's something I've been a little convicted of. But no, it's how you present yourself online. I mean, there's a joke that I know so many great camera operators and DPs who have horrible social media, but like, you know what I mean? That's kind of an industry joke. It's fine. You know, I think I agree. Mike Ladisa is one of them as well, but his are consistent. And they crack me up every time. His posts are such dad energy. It is hilarious.
I feel that.
Anyways, yeah. But I don't know. So that's something that I've been doing a lot of thinking about, and I'm really interested in social media. I've seen a lot of people use it to their advantage. So I try to post as much to social media as possible. But again, going back to what I said before, we're all very busy. And that's been something that this year I'm like, okay, you really need to make time in your schedule. You want to do YouTube videos, you want to do online content. And so that's something that I've been planning for a couple months, which is very kind of hand in hand with what you're doing on this series, which is really cool, of kind of helping people get those resources that they need. And just not really gatekeeping that a whole lot, not like, you know, I will tell, the thing is, like, you can tell everyone your industry secrets or how you got in the industry, and like, they still may or may not make it. You know what I mean? That's why I don't think like there's that big of a competition, because there's a lot of work out there, and there's a place for everyone. I really think that I've tried to get so many of my friends and family in this business, and I still am. I'm the oldest of 9 siblings, so I'm trying to get all my siblings like kind of like, come on, I'll get you a job as a PA or something. Because I do believe that there's a place for a lot of different personality types within production. You might not be the traditional like camera person, but I've found that certain positions on set, like audio guys, like it kind of tends to draw a certain type of personality. Like, I don't know, everyone's unique in their own way, but
so going from the branding, because I know, because you say you post, you have an Instagram, I'm assuming. Do you have a website as well?
It's not launched yet, but I'm finishing it up with my brother right now, who does websites. So he's helping me out with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And what about networking? What do you do for networking? How important would you say networking is?
Networking is very important. Find Instagram groups, pages. If you're in South Florida, there's one called Women on Set, which is women group. There's Orlando weekend filmmaker. Like, again, go back to the Facebook groups and just type in like keywords in the area you live. There's Instagram pages that host Q&As, panels, discussions, screenings in most parts of the country. So kind of getting involved in that, I think, looking what's your local like indie festival, or if you have a local film festival, getting involved in that, and kind of also seeing, it depends on what direction you want to go though, because if you really like, if you want to be doing what you're doing, Dondi, for example, and not being like the scripted indie side, then, you know, finding a local production studio that like just needs extra hands is probably the best way to go. Like, I mean, I can't imagine you would say no if you had a high school who was a, you know, really hard worker, say, hey, can I stop by your office after school like 2 days a week and see how you guys, you know, take apart your gear or prep for the next shoot, or that kind of thing. You know what I mean? I think it's the shadowing and shadowing is the best way to learn. I am personally, and always have been, a very kinetic, like hands-on learner. So watching like YouTube videos really only goes so far. I've learned the most by, hey, let's build this camera, let's build this ready rig, let's put this, you know, rig on and see how it fits and see how it works. And as well as taking notes, as you can probably tell, I'm very ADHD, and that's something I'm proud of. But like, one problem I would always have with it wasn't a problem, but it was something I had to learn to do. I still do shoot a lot of news stuff like ABC, CNN, NBC, ESPN, but all of their live shots are like, their camera specs are a little different. But you're kind of expected, once you get on the shoot with them, if you've shot with ABC before, they expect you to know what their frame rate, their resolution is, and stuff like that. So like, I had a note in my phone that was like, okay, ABC News wants this, CNN wants this. So using my notes app has been huge, because my brain is very short-term memory. So understanding all of that stuff, because at the end of the day, my job's pretty technical too, and relying on people who know more than me. Like, I'll go back to the story I said earlier about the shoot we did. I was calling you and asking you, okay, this is going to work because this goes with this, or maybe there's a piece of gear. I remember with the Pterodex, we were talking about the Serve Pros, which I hadn't worked with before, and I was like, wow, I described what I needed, and you were like, this device does exactly that, and it solved the problem. So for the most part of my technical process in film and in film and TV, like, yeah, you always find a piece of gear you didn't know existed before, and you're like, this makes my life 100 times easier, like locket boxes or tentacles. And now we have the tentacles mostly, but yeah, that's very cool. That's fun. Those feels like
those
Christmas.
Are always asking questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. If you ask questions,
no, there's nothing wrong with questions.
You'll be fine. Oh, like you said, always go to somebody else that knows more than you to help you. I do the same thing. I always ask somebody that knows better than me on certain things.
Yes, there's two sides to that. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, and you're in the moment, you're with your mentor, maybe you're on set, whatever. Hey, like, how do I get this? How do I change the frame rate? I forgot how to do that on this camera. There's nothing wrong with that. However, I want to emphasize the ease and the fact that we all have one of these in our pocket, and that you can Google how to change Sony camera frame rate, FS5, you know, whatever camera is you're shooting on, because but also, like, there's been people who've expressed interest, and for me, as someone who grew up like scouring Reddit, like scouring YouTube, scouring like all these online platforms of like, hey, what kind of pants should I wear on set? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what should I wear? What should I bring? Like, what kind of, you know, tape should I be using for different types of things? So I want to emphasize, there's nothing wrong with asking questions, of course, but also having that agency and like doing your own research, because like a lot of those, especially technical stuff, is online. And like, can this camera do, you know, 4K 60 or 4K 120? Like, those little things, like, that's like really quick Google search, or just searching the manuals. It sounds really boring, but like, it's something you have to do, is kind of just skimming through camera manuals or whatever device you're working with. This is just camera stuff I'm talking about, but
I get why you're saying that though, because you don't want to be the one that looks too green on set either, because people could tell real quick. So I understand why you're saying that. You know, take the time and do some research. Yeah, some questions are good, but however, not all, because you don't want to be known as the newbie on set as well for that. I get it.
I think I was more saying it for like myself, because I've gotten questions like that, and like how do you put together a production budget? And I'm like, you can Google that. So I often think if there's a question I have for someone that's really specific, or if I'm like in a crunch on a set and like it's an emergency, then I'll call like someone, another DP I know or something like that. Like that's also great having those relationships. Like I know I have a couple people on speed dial that if my camera just totally dies on set, I can call them and they'll be like, oh, this happened to me once. That's what this message means. So that's helpful sometimes, but most of the times you're troubleshooting, like most people are just going to go to Google first anyway. So yeah, I just want to emphasize the autonomy and just going and researching it for yourself. You can learn a lot and then be ready to learn more when you get on set. But no, and I also don't think that you should ever make anyone feel stupid because they learned to do something differently than you know,
Right.
or if they learned, I think you find that a little bit between like what the non-scripted or like commercial corporate world versus TV series versus film, like even between those, even between like stuff on East Coast, West Coast, and they have different lingo for different things. That's why I go back to like knowing your cameras. If you know your gear really well and you know how to communicate the vision you have, then you'll get so much farther than just memorizing a textbook of like text words. Cause like it's, that can change. Like I've worked with crews from LA and New York and they say different things, or they might call an apple box different things. Like they have the whole hot dog versus what's the other one, hamburger, you know, so
Listen.
sometimes I get lost on that, but
I get lost too. I mean, I know what you're talking about, especially with the Apple Box. A certain way is a different name. I'm like, look, when I went to school, it's just put it on the side or put it regular, you know. But now, like you said, it has all these names. And that's all where you're at as well. And Eli just reminded me, like, when I went to school, and you were carrying a C-stand and going out, no one told me that you were supposed to say points or anything. I just found that out like during COVID. We had an intern
really,
here,
you haven't said
and
points.
he's I had no idea, and he's like, we're striking this podcast that we were filming in the studio here, and he's like points, and I'm like, points. I'm like, what the heck is he talking about points? He's like, you never heard of that? I'm like, never once on set. And then once he told me, next time I was on set, I heard everybody saying it. And I was like,
that's funny.
So I came back and I'm like, so that whole points thing, I guess it's the thing. I guess it's the thing. But
it is. Like
you said, it all depends where you work as well, what region you work at for those certain things, for certain names, you know, of things as well. But it's all up in the air. I mean, it's all how you take it, I guess.
Yeah. But I think you're so great for that, Dondi, because like everybody, I understand everyone works differently, but I've seen people get chewed out. Like I saw a PA get chewed out once because he heard someone ask for an apple, didn't know what an apple box was, so he brought them an apple from Crafty, like trying to be helpful, right? Like that's coming from a good place. But like
I'm laughing because that happened to me. And the person who's listening to this right now is laughing at the same time. Listen, we were shooting this is a true story. True story. Oh my God. We were shooting a national TV commercial for Academy Sports. It had to be whenever we shot in the store, we had to do it overnight because we had to wait for the store to close down, right? Because we couldn't stop business. Mm-hmm. He said it was 3:45 in the morning. That's what he just told me in my ear right here. So I'm like, hey man, grab me an apple real quick. Literally comes back. He's like, he hands me the apple and I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm like, so it dawned on him like, oh my God, this is not what he meant. He meant an apple box.
He meant an apple box. I'm sure I've done stuff like that. You know.
Oh my God! When he said that, oh my God, I knew it. He probably thinks I told you that story, but I never told anybody that story. I let him tell it.
You didn't. Somebody else told me that. Like, yeah, no, it's fine. But at the same time, like the way you're, but even like, I just want to say this because like being on set is intense sometimes. There's a lot of intense emotions. Sometimes people like get really short with you and it's not, you know, whatever. That's one thing I love about working with your team. You guys are so wonderful and I've never seen that, but it does happen. It does happen. Yeah. And I don't think it's acceptable. I don't think it should be normalized. I will say the more women on set, the less that happens, I feel like. But I've been that person, and I've seen so many people get like, they're trying to make like feel less than. And okay, this is the other thing, which I have to say is that women in the camera department, everyone I talk to have had some sort of an experience of someone being like, I don't know, intimidated that they might know more than them, and they get treated worse because of that. And
Wow.
it's really sad, but it's happened. That's what happened to me this last summer. And I realized that like that's just the way the industry works. But at the same time, my philosophy is like, I'm always going to do a really good job. I'm going to finish the job I came here to do. And I'm going to keep pursuing my career and keep doing my thing. And if someone's like mistreating someone, like maybe their career won't go as far. Like, but that's like not on me, and that's not anything I have to worry about. All I can worry about is how I'm treating people. And I have, like, there was one time I was short with someone on set, and somebody called me out. She's like, you shouldn't talk to people like that. And it was because someone came up to me and I was really stressed, and I said, hey, can you take this conversation elsewhere? And I was short with it, and I was very stressed, and I'm not proud of that moment. But I am thankful that someone said something to me, because I never want to end up being like some of the old school women I see on set who like have a bit more of an attitude, because maybe they feel like they've had to have that attitude in order to get the respect that they need to do their job. So I always want to have that conversation, because I think it's a factor in everyday life, not just in our jobs. But yeah, definitely. Definitely. So don't make someone feel bad that they don't know something. If someone asks me a really stupid question, I'll answer. It's not that it's just that they don't know. But yeah, at the same time, like if you're nervous, like does he mean an apple or an apple box? Like maybe Google it really quick, you know?
Oh, we definitely laughed about. Oh, it was the joke for the rest of the shoot. Let's just put it that way.
That's so funny. I do say that all the time because I remember that. But
oh man, so let's talk about payment wise, because especially being a freelancer now. So you know what it was being staff, right, and now being a freelancer, right? Freelancers often irregular payment schedules, right? What tips do you have for budgeting and managing finances? How do you do it?
Well, I'm definitely no model, but like to follow, but I'm still figuring that out. I'm very much still figuring that out.
What, you didn't research it, Abby? You didn't research it?
No, I've done a lot of research on this. You have to plan it out, because you have to know, if you don't know, that our industry rotates on net 30s, net 60s, sometimes net 90s on the East Coast. I've seen the Upper East Coast, a lot of net 90s. And that means you don't get paid. You do the work and you don't get paid. Once you have a certain level of, like, maybe if you're a production company, or if you're, like, I know a hair and makeup artist who she will always request to be paid upfront or day of. And in certain areas of the country, like I've noticed in South Florida, that's also pretty normalized. Because maybe if you were working with someone you haven't worked with before, you don't have the trust that like they're going to pay you when 30 days comes. I remember getting a check from a commercial I did like 6 months later, and I found out they had to take that company to court to get the whole crew paid out because they hadn't paid their crew. So that's, again, where the relationships comes into it. I'm lucky that I feel like I work with people I trust, and I know that, you know, if I have to wait 30 days or 60, like the check will be in the mail, you know what I mean? But there is some of that. There's some of you have to, like, you know, 30 days goes by and you don't hear anything. It's crickets. You have to send the follow-up to your invoice and be like, hey, just checking in. What's the status on this? Usually it's like, oh, we just, you know, sent it out or processed it yesterday. Usually it's one of those. But maybe, you know, it's one of those where it's like, oh, sorry, like I just totally forgot to send this to accounting. I'm sorry. And then they get it to you expedited or whatever it looks like. But definitely having some sort of savings is the number one thing, which is kind of a curse when you tell a camera person that, because at the same time, a camera person is like, what can I spend my little bit of extra money? Am I going to save that, or am I going to spend that on like a nicer camera, you know? Right. So, or maybe a new set of lenses or whatever it is you're looking at gear wise. So I definitely balance that because I'm a little bit of an impulse shopper when it comes to camera gear. So you have to balance that. And I think keeping your cost of living as low as possible, if you're living with your parents, if you're living with family, living with roommates, and at the same time, like knowing your value. It's why go back to what I said before of like, it's really important for me to be marketing myself as a DP because that's where I believe my value is. It doesn't mean I'll take other jobs or other opportunities because everyone's had to do this, especially with the strike. Like there's so many amazing, talented people who are out of work, like, and they're taking whatever they can because they have to pay the bills, and that's fine. But then how you're marketing yourself, I think that's like how you grow your financial, because now I know like I'm worth this much. Or you asking other DPs like how much they charge. I will straight up ask other camera guys like, hey, what's your day rate, or what do you do? Because I don't like being kept in the dark about what the client's like budget is for whatever it is they're asking me for. So that's a little tricky thing too, because oftentimes I don't know if you have any advice on that, honestly, but when someone's like, hey, what's your day rate? Like they'll just start with that kind of quote, and it's hard because it's like, well, what kind of shoot is it? What kind of cameras are you looking for? Maybe if it's, a new client, like their budget is only like $1,500 for the day or whatever, and maybe your normal day rate is more than that. Different areas of the country, like people make different amounts. There's the union rates, which kind of give everyone a baseline standard, but you don't always get that. So I think it's always a conversation of like, how much is this worth investing in for you, like for your company when you're talking to your clients? Like, do you want to make this into a $10,000 shoot, or do you just need like a one-man band, green screen, we're going to edit it and post sort of thing? So are we going to shoot it on an iPhone, or are we going to shoot it on, the new Burano? I'm very excited about that camera. But, you know what I mean? I don't know if you have any advice on that, but it's good to have a baseline to know what you're worth and to stand up for that. But
for sure,
my day rates fluctuate.
Like you said, you should always have your base. I always try to stay. I don't want to be the most expensive, but I don't want to be the cheapest either. So I always have the base of the industry, and then, like you said, ask all those questions and see what you can do, especially with gear and upselling. Like, let's say you don't get your rate, but you have the gear that's going with it. So sometimes you have to take away a little bit of rate because you're going to make the money on the gear anyway. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And it's also, don't be so stuck on the rate that you don't know if that client is going to give you a bunch of more jobs in the future. It's all about the relationships and building the clientele. You know what I mean? So if you're only stuck on your rate, that's all it's ever going to be. That's all it's ever going to be. And you're not going to grow that way.
I think also I got a lot of experience doing that, selling weddings when I was doing that for a couple of years, and I'll still do them every now and then. But if you think of like a normal couple who's going to have like a wedding, they're going to have 150 to 300 people there. That's a pretty big event for someone who's not a professional event planner to plan. So every time I was consulting those clients, I dealt with a lot of, whether it was with photo or video or both, because I would often like outsource and bring them like a team. And my packages and stuff, I always had to defend, like, this is why this package costs $4,000 or $3,000, whatever, for one day. It feels like one day for you, but then something clients also don't put into mind in that concept is like the time that I am putting in editing and the time I'm putting in maybe traveling there if they're not paying for me to travel to wherever it is. So having those conversations and then also that's one conversation you can have is say, because they look at it and they think that you're making $3,000 in a day flat, and we're not. First of all, as freelancers, you always have to think about your taxes first. So like 30% of what I make, I put aside. And it's maybe a little but that's about like what we have to do for taxes every year anyway. So that's already 30%, which is quite a large chunk taken out, minus what you were saying about the gear. So if you're shooting on a camera kit, say your camera kit's like $5,000 if you're in DSLR wedding world, like that's something you're also paying off. So it's like a rental fee that you have kind of built into that package. But then also like, I feel like there's not enough emphasis put on it because the photos and videos, at least in that like sphere, like I was like, these are going to be what you show your family for the rest of your life, hopefully, especially photos. Because I'm like, these are the photos you're going to put up around your house 50 years from now. These can be like, wow, look at grandma and grandpa at their wedding. Like, so in today's day and age, like that's kind of how I would have that conversation with the client of like, yeah, maybe you're paying a premium, but like also like, remember, you're going to have these for the rest of your life. The $10,000 you're going to pay for catering is going to be gone like that. You know what I mean? Cake's not going to last forever, but my photos will. And I think that that's really what's worth investing in. And I think that rhetoric really much, it translates to a lot of what we do now, because we do a lot of corporate stuff that is evergreen on somebody's website. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And
No,
that's
what
really
you're
important
saying is actually very
too.
good. It's a good way to sell, right? To sell what you're providing and letting them see it in a different way. It's very, very good advice what you just gave there. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, the last thing I say, it works in like the film world too. I just was reading this dissertation about it, because the relationship between investors and people who want to be filmmakers is like, yes, you have this beautiful idea for a film or whatever, but at the end of the day, films are really only a vessel for somebody to be able to, it has to be a business model in some sense, because somebody has to make the money back. If you're going to spend, $1 million putting this thing together, that's not nothing. So how can you make that back? And having that plan ahead of time really is what helps people get a lot more on the investor side. And so that's why.
So Abby, that was really good. I'm glad you brought that up too on the business aspect as well, because it's one thing to be creative, but you always have to have the business model with it. Now I want to talk about how you balance your home and work life. How do you do that? Because as you know, this industry is very chaotic. You could work weekends, nights, holidays. It doesn't matter, right? You could be on the road like you are now. And how long have you been on the road now, Abby?
Since October 10th. What day is it?
Like since October 10th. Okay. Mm-hmm. And before that, you said you were in LA and then Vegas or something like that, right?
Yeah. I do travel as much as possible.
Yeah. So how do you maintain the home work life thing? How do you balance it all out?
For me, my most important personal life people are my family, and that are my siblings. So I try to see them as much as possible. Most of them live in Wisconsin. So I knew from starting this when I was in high school, I always knew I was going to move away, and that would have to be far from my family. So mentally, it's something I was always prepared for. But doesn't make it any easier. So I definitely miss them a lot. I've had a lot of really frank conversations with mentors who are maybe 10, 15 years ahead. And it's a very blunt, you're throwing your 20s at your career. And if that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do it. And that's kind of been my philosophy on that. And so a lot of my life revolves around my job. And I love my job, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But I think for me, it just means scheduling time to go on trips with my siblings and stuff like that. But for the most part, I love being on the road. I usually have my cat with me. She's not here right now, but she was here at the beginning. And I'm thankful for that. But that's the only, it's never felt weird for me. I will say, in the problems I've had, not everyone is built like that. So I've definitely had issues where it's why are you never at home, or why are you never in Miami, or whatever, that consistency. But for me, I love even being on this one shoot for more than a month straight, I'm kind of going a little crazy. I'm in the one place too long. I've moved from Wisconsin, then I was in Atlanta, and then I was in Dallas, and now I'm in Miami. And I don't know if I'll move somewhere else next, but I really like Miami. So it's kind of something that's how I was wired. So I'm just tuning into that. And at some point, if I decide I want to have kids or something like that, then okay, I have to reevaluate, because that lifestyle looks different. But I'm just cruising at this point.
So what about burnout though? Because if you say you're putting everything in, and I get it, I was there too. You know what I mean? But you're creating your name. You're making your mark in the industry. But how do you keep yourself from burning out?
A lot of reading, a lot of personal reflection, journaling, keeping my personal and spiritual disciplines in check, and how I'm taking care of myself. That self-care it's very important. But also it affects the jobs I take. The job I'm on now, for example, I had a pretty big back injury that flared up that I wasn't able to walk this year twice, and it scared me a lot. And it was because I do a lot of heavy lifting on set and everything, and it scared me because I was well, what if this affects my career in the long run? And so I really had to reevaluate, and not being able to lift and everything. And so I wasn't able to lift for a couple months. So for example, that's why I took this job. that I'm doing now, because I'm being their DIT media manager for what I'm doing. And it's something that's very sedentary. It's very like I'm in an office all day, which is not my favorite, but I'm still on set. I'm still working with people I love. I'm still in the industry I love, but I can kind of do it more at my own pace. And so, for example, this last month, and I planned for that because I knew I was getting physically burnt out with this industry, or with this injury. I'm sorry. And so I've been taking the time of like, okay, I have a little bit more of a chill job the next 2 months on this gig. So I have time in the mornings to go do yoga or go do the things that are going to take care of me physically and mentally. Right. This book actually has been huge in kind of getting that mindset, and it helps people work through burnout and work through those blocks that we have in our life. And so a lot of my industry friends recommended it. And so I started working through that. So I think taking care of yourself in every aspect, whether it's spiritually, mentally, or especially physically, I knew getting into this, like the most successful people in this industry are the oldest. You know what I mean? Like the Roger Deakins of this industry. He's in his 70s and he's still working. So it's very much like of a long game. This is not a get rich quick sort of industry. This is a very long hours. But over people's careers of people that I admire, I love the results that I see, and that's what's worth it for me. But in the meantime, you have to take care of yourself. I think that there's like a stereotype on set that like people eat like crap or whatever, but a lot of my crew members, like they're very health conscious. They're very like going to the gym. They're taking care of like what they're eating. They're avoiding things that are going to cause inflammatories in our body, like gluten or dairy or sugar, because they know that they're working 12 hours a day out in the sun for weeks on end, and that's not going to hold you up. And every person is different, but that's something that's become with my injury really, really prevalent and important to me in my life. And I've become a much healthier person because of it. I just wish that it was more emphasized to me before I had that injury. But at the same time, I mean, we're young and everyone makes mistakes, whatever. But like taking care of yourself and your body is like so, so important. I can't emphasize that enough.
I'm glad you said that, because it's very important. Like you said, this is long game. This industry is taxing. It does a lot on your body. It does a lot on your health. You know,
and get good
sometimes
shoes.
You could be in corporate world. You could be in corporate world. I remember when I first got into corporate world, and people, when I first got into it, I'm like, why is everybody dying in here? But they don't see sunlight. All they did was drink coffee and smoke, and that was it. And I'm like, yeah, or they had a heart attack. You know what I mean? And you're just like, this is terrible. So I'm glad that things are changing like that too. You know, and this is look, I'm 50 now, and I'm still doing Steadicam, and I didn't want to do Steadicam after that. You know, I was like, I wanted to be done. You know, but you do got to take care of yourself. So I'm glad you said everything you said. I want to end it with this. What key aspects would it take for someone to succeed in this industry?
I think respect and having respect for the people you're working with, for their experience. And you never know who knows who or who's worked on what with who. And that's not the only reason you respect someone. You should respect someone just because they're human. But that's been my biggest thing, is the most surprising people you don't know. And you start asking them about their work history or what kind of stuff they do or whatever, and they'll tell you the craziest stories. So also being a really good listener, I think, is part of it.
All right, Abby, I want to thank you so much for taking out the time to meet with us today and giving all the advice to our viewers. You gave a lot of good advice to them, and I wish you all the best in your career, because I know you are going to be very successful.
Thank you so much. I had such a nice time talking with you.
Yes. Until next time, I'm sure we'll see each other soon. Have a good one.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dondi. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Abby. Abby shares some invaluable insights. Some key takeaways were the importance of continuous learning. Regardless of whether you attend film school or not, it doesn't matter. She also stressed the significance of networking. She highlighted the use of Facebook groups as a valuable resource. Abby also underlined the importance of maintaining a positive attitude and remaining versatile in your career, meaning don't just learn to do one job, learn to do many different crew positions, especially in your early stages. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Media Hub. I'm your host, Dondi Sanchez. We'll see you on the next one. Are you a filmmaker or content creator with a vision that demands the best? Then look no further than IPGRentals.com, the ultimate destination for audio, video, lighting, drones, and support gear for your productions. At IPG Rentals, we believe in the power of collaboration. Our gear becomes an extension of your creativity, bringing your vision to life. And with our tagline, Our Gear, Your Vision, we're not just a rental service, we're your production partner. Why choose IPG Rentals, you may ask? Easy. We bring quality, reliability, and an extensive range of top-notch equipment. From industry-standard cameras and audio equipment to state-of-the-art lighting and drones, our gear is meticulously maintained to ensure you get the best results every time. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.ipgrentals.com. Our Gear, Your Vision.